You've been part of the street protests over the last 9 months, trying to stop Mr. Netanyahu's government from making constitutional changes to curb the powers of the Supreme Court. Now, we in India and many across the world are in awe of the human and technical capabilities of the Mossad, the Shin Bet, and the IDF. And the biggest question that's asked the world over, especially in India, is how could the mighty Israeli Defense Forces and the intelligence services, on whom so many books and movies are made, how could they allow for an attack of this magnitude to be launched right under their noses? What do you think went wrong?
First of all, it happened. First of all, it happened. So it means that it can happen, even to good intelligence service. It's a major failure of our intelligence. They should give us both kind of strategic warnings several months ago, and for sure a tactical warning the night before. It's a failure, as usual, as was the case with 9/11 and with our 73 war. You go backward even to World War II, to Pearl Harbor or Barbarossa. In retrospect, you will find that there were many pieces of information that were known but were not interpreted properly under certain conception, so that somehow Hamas is deterred and they are not capable to do something so dramatic. It's a grave mistake that we paid very, very heavily for it. It's also with, in spite of heroic operation of the soldiers on the ground and the first responders that came, and even civilians within the kibbutzim, within the villages, civilians with handguns fought against those heavily equipped terrorists. In spite of their heroic operation, it's also failure of our forces on the ground. So we will discuss it after the war. And in regard to the other part of your question, which I think was about the judicial reform. I am one of the harshest critiques of Netanyahu for this judicial reform that our living Supreme Court chief defined when it was announced some 10 months ago. She said, this is not a judicial reform. This is a blatant attempt to crash the independence of the Supreme Court and push Israel out of the family of democracies. And I criticize maybe heavily for it, but more important in regard to the war now, the leaders of our defense establishment, the Minister of Defense, his Minister of Defense, the Minister of Defense nominated by Netanyahu, and the Chief of Staff, and the Head of Intelligence, and the Head of the Secretary, all warned him in March, 7 months ago, that there is an imminent and apparent risk to our national security as a result of this amok run toward the legislation of this judicial coup d'etat. And 3 months ago, in July, they passed one of the laws, a series of laws from this coup d'etat, judicial coup d'etat, where once again the Minister of Defense, the Head of Armed Forces, the Head of Intelligence, insisted they have to tell the cabinet and tell the members of Knesset what are these national security implications of passing this law. And Netanyahu didn't allow them to do that. And that's a very heavy responsibility on Netanyahu, because first of all, Netanyahu is not American president, he's not commander-in-chief. In Israel, it's the whole government, he's just a first among equal. But more than this, because of the reason, everyone understands why Netanyahu didn't let the security or defense establishment to brief the ministers and the members of Knesset. The reason is, he understood that if they will hear the risk to the national security from this legislation, they would not vote for it. And he needed this law in order to paralyze the Supreme Court. And he needed to paralyze the Supreme Court in order to taking himself out of his criminal court case. He's standing a trial for bribery and breach of trust and fraud. And he wants to use, that's where his personal interest to get rid of his court case intervene with the national security of the nation. And that's heavy burden that he carries with him.